Hi, this is Donna Faye Whitesinger, Navajo County Supervisor for District 5. Thank you for joining us today. Today we have a special guest with us, Glenn Kephart, and he's going to talk to us about an initiative we've been working on for quite some time, Broadband. Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you, Chairwoman. It's a pleasure to be here. I wouldn't consider myself a special guest, but
always
thank you.
Special, always special. Thank you for coming. I know certainly we've talked about, I guess, broadband and how it's negatively or the challenges that have been brought to our community and how it's impacted our community. And so we've been talking a lot about, well, how do we better support broadband initiative within our community? But before we get into like, what does that look like? What is broadband?
Oh, well, thank you. That's a really good question because we all think we know, but and I'll try to put it in terms of things that I can understand. And one thing I can understand when I log onto my computer at nighttime or during the day, I want it to do what I want it to do, and I want it to do it fast. Yeah. And I don't want to have to wait. And I don't want it to be interrupted. Well, when you have a good and healthy broadband and internet connection, and you have high capacity and you have good speed, those things are possible. But I don't know if you ever thought about, how's that so? Where's that come from?
Yeah.
This doesn't come out of the air. In our case, our broadband and internet actually lives down in Phoenix. And we need to get it from here to Phoenix. One thing that helps me understand that is I think of our transportation network, our roadways. And you have a driveway into your house out to a local street. The local street goes out into the neighborhood, which connects maybe onto 77 or 260 or 60. And those roads then connect onto maybe I-40, or you can take it all the way down to the valley. Well, internet works pretty much the same way. You have to have it connected to your house. That can happen wirelessly, or it can happen, ideally, it happens with a fiber optic cable. Goes out of your house into your local street, out onto the arterials, your 77, your 260, your 60, and then connects to what they call the backhaul, which would be internet coming up from the valley to along I-40, or perhaps APS has a project internet coming up from the valley to Joe City. And we have to connect all that. And in our county, we have pieces connected. The other piece about that highway network, if one of our roads is blocked, normally we have options unless there's a lot of snow, but sometimes there's a crash or something happened in Payson, we can take Highway 60 down. So we need what we call redundancy, so you have alternative routes. So if the fiber internet gets cut on 260, we can route from maybe Route 77 back around to Show Low, Pine Top area, or Heber Evergard, wherever that may be. That's sort of, does that help?
It certainly does. I think when we think about the pandemic, and so how did that impact the way that we interacted with broadband and the internet?
Yeah.
You know, there were so many of us who faced different challenges. Like there were education systems who had most of their children who were learning online, or you had telemedicine. What did that look like? We had public safety needs. There were so many needs in being able to ensure that connectivity was available for everybody. And we all felt some of those constraints and the delays that existed. And I know recently we had a large outage, and so that became more prevalent in the need for redundancy. So I think there are a lot of, we don't give it a second thought. You know, it's kind of those things we take for granted in a sense. It's going to work when we turn it on. But when it doesn't work, those are the times that we certainly feel its impact. And we don't want to be in those circumstances when it comes to an emergency situation or someone needs immediate needs. So I think there's a lot of great stuff happening around broadband and how it can positively impact our community. So one of the things that keeps coming up is the middle mile. What is the middle mile?
So the middle mile is, going back to that transportation analogy, would be the middle mile is it's your 260, Route 77. In our case, our middle mile that we would build would connect to the internet coming up from Phoenix somewhere around I-40. And then it travels south through Holbrook, Snowflake, Taylor, onto Sholo, and up to Pine Top Lakeside, back out to Heber Overguard, and then wirelessly back to Winslow, because there's really no population there. And that we call a middle mile. And if you noticed, I created an entire loop, if you're familiar with our geography. Mm-hmm. So I go back to the redundancy. If that gets cut in one place, you just reroute and come around the other way. And you still have, you have high capacity, you have speed, and you have redundancy, which are the three key pieces we have. The challenge with that middle mile that has always been, and I'm grateful to you and the Board of Supervisors' foresight, even before COVID, when we saw how important this was and the disparity it caused in our community, where some people had better connectivity than other people. I think we especially saw that in our school children, right? So you had the foresight to say, that's not okay for our future. We need to address this. And we hired a firm, do you remember, called Magellan Advisors. They looked at what we had in Navajo County, not only what we had, what's planned to be built, what the infrastructure is. They met with all the towns and cities and the public works organizations and said, okay, here's what we have. They also did surveys to assess the internet capacity throughout our county. And what they found was not a surprise, but disturbing, that less than 50% of the people in Navajo County had adequate internet access. Needed to be addressed, right? And their solution to address it was that middle mile network. We also knew that significant grant funding, and you'll talk about that, was coming up. But to be eligible for that grant funding, you got to have a plan, and you got to know what you need and have a plan to build it. Magellan provided that for us, and they provided us that middle mile network as a first phase. It's only a first phase because we have opportunities to connect north to the tribal and south to White River, and east and west to our neighboring counties, Coconino, Gila, Apache, to reinforce that overall network and have a robust system throughout Navajo County, not just Navajo County, all of northern Arizona. So.
Yeah, I really am grateful that we had the foresight as a team to be able to think about what are the needs, what are those challenges that we're facing now, and how do we face those challenges and ensure that we're providing better services to the community as a whole. And so looking at Magellan was certainly a step in the right direction, and it was to our advantage to be able to have a company who thoroughly looked at what does that look like in our region. And I know that you talked about townships and you talked about their partnerships and so forth and their support, and we are so grateful because that was a huge endeavor to be able to look at each township and for them to participate in being able to offer information and knowledge about, well, what does that look like within your community? So if you look at that report, it's pretty comprehensive in being able to, or it's comprehensive in being able to look at, well, what does Navajo County look like? And for us to look at that, 50% of the population potentially doesn't have adequate access, there is something wrong there. So how did you use this information to apply for the grant, and what did that look like? What was the outcome?
So the timing worked out perfectly for us. Magellan completed their report last fall, just in time when the Arizona Corporation Commission, ACA, put out a notice of funding opportunity for broadband grant money. It was money that the governor had set $100 million aside to expand broadband in Arizona, and $77 million of that was to go to the rural counties. We had exactly what they were looking for, and we had it ready to go. We knew how much it would cost, which is about a $20 million cost for that project that I described. And we knew how many people it would serve. We knew the current state of why it needed to serve those people. We knew how it could be expanded in the future to connect even the larger region. So we were able to put all that together in the grant application. But you mentioned the towns and cities and the support that they provided. They all provided a letter of support for this. So we were unified as a region, and not just the towns and cities. The Navajo Nation, the White Mountain Apache Tribe provided letters of support. All the public safety and police agencies provided letters of support. Our economic development wing of Real AZ provided a letter of support. And in a conversation with Keith Watkins, who's the ACA director, recently, he said those letters of support were so important. And also somewhat unique that we're that united as a county, that we stick together on something this important. We don't compete against each other, we work together. So everything just came together perfectly for us. And as a result of that, the ACA grant awards were a maximum of $10 million. We had asked for $9.7 million to match $10 million that the county put aside from ARPA dollars. And just last week, they announced that we were successful and we got the $9.7 million. I would add to that part of that application was to pick a firm to be a partner, a firm who can actually run an internet service. They would operate, maintain, market it out to partners. And we chose WANRAC, a firm from Kansas City, and they've been doing this all over the country and have a lot of resources. And it's been a pleasure to work with them thus far as we kick this project off.
Yeah, I think there is great. When we take us, I guess, some steps back and looking at the development of working towards that grant, there were so many people who stepped forward and knew the importance in being able to bring this to our community or make the request to make this feasible. That's something that our region can access. So that when looking at the grant, you had spoke to that briefly about how our application was reviewed. That when we looked at looked at the partnership and all of those who participated, that was the thing that stood out the most. That was the thing where they felt like here was a community who was going to use the resources because everybody within that community was in a cooperative and was agreeable to this being able to use those dollars and the circumstances that were within the community. So I think there was a lot of good conversation there. And so when we're looking forward, there are certainly a lot of challenges in making sure that this comes to fruition. So when we think about when do you think we'll be able to access this?
So we're in negotiations right now with our partner WANRAC. Magellan is advising us, and also APS, because a portion of this will run on APS transmission lines to get the design kicked off. And we expect to have the design kicked off here in the next couple of months. And construction will begin by the end of this year, early next year, and about a year's worth of construction. So we're talking in the real near term, right? It's not something that's 10 years out.
Yeah.
But I would add that it's just the beginning. The Arizona Commerce Authority has already informed us that they're going to have similar money available next year this time, and have asked us start getting ready. And we're in discussions with Magellan about what's our next project, because we have a lot of opportunities, like I said before, of connecting to our neighboring counties and also connecting north and south to our tribal partners, and we'll be working on that over the next few months. So.
That's pretty exciting. It is something that the entire community will be looking forward to. So if the community wants to look at progress or knowing what's happening, what do they do? Where do they go?
Okay, I would encourage you to go to our Navajo County website, and you can sign up there for regular updates. I would also say, as you go to our Facebook or any of our social media, you can sign up for the updates. We can put that on the screen as far as to what that connection is. We're also working with, if you remember, we have an Assistant County Manager, Brian Layton, who does this sort of fun animated whiteboard thing. And so what we plan to do is something similar to that. We want to tell the story of this as it goes along. Yeah. As we get into design, as we're going to start construction, as maybe they're pulling some wire between Holbrook and Snowflake. we want to continually tell that story to the community, keep them informed.
Great. Well, thank you. We're so glad that you joined us today. And I think, I know as a community that this is something that we're all excited about. I know that as the Board of Supervisors that we're grateful to be able to have all of our partners who worked hard to help us invest in making this possible for the community. So thank you, Glenn, and thank you to the entire team at Navajo County. And thank you for joining us.